Apresentar a Christina Barbosa, que é a professora desse módulo de História da Ciência de Educação, que esse ano não pôde dar aula para a gente. Segundo semestre.
Deixa eu olhar meio curioso. Obrigada.
Eu estou esperando essa máquina nascer, porque eu falo com isso. Eu entendo alemão. Eu entendo alemão. Alguém fala assim. Ah, esse ele é papel. Sim, né? Você viu que eu faço isso, tá? Não vai fazer isso. Isso é feio. Isso é feio. Aí você pode falar do temor, você pode dar chave para fazer choose, auf Wiedersehen, os básicos. Choose, fazer choose, tchau, auf Wiedersehen. Mas é uma língua que eu quero aprender. Que é a água.
Ah, você tem isso.
Põe a aguinha para beber dentro, aí eu calmo.
Boa tarde a todos.
Boa tarde.
Dá início à mesa Emmanuel Liais, entre a França e o Brasil, Espaço Celeste e a natureza tropical. Mas antes eu queria só explicar um pouquinho. Esse evento é parte de uma iniciativa, né, de um grupo de estudo sobre instrumentos científicos e, em particular, de um projeto que eu estou coordenando para fazer uma exposição sobre os instrumentos matemáticos. Então, é também, enfim, uma maneira de eu me aproximar desses objetos, entender um pouco também do trabalho dos astrônomos que efetivamente utilizaram, realizaram algumas tarefas pesquisas e estudos usando alguns dos instrumentos que possivelmente a gente tem no acervo. E também um desafio para mim até que ponto eu posso qualificar alguns como matemáticos, né? Se isso diferencia alguns objetos ou não. Enfim, então é parte desse projeto mais amplo. E aí para a gente é um prazer ter aqui alguns convidados, mas em primeiro lugar eu queria apresentar a Christina Barbosa. Acho que é sempre um desafio apresentar um colega, né, na casa que esse colega trabalha, mas acho que é importante, porque para mediar essa mesa eu chamei a Christina Barbosa justamente porque, enfim, o trabalho dela tem uma relação muito próxima com o objeto de discussão dessa mesa, não só porque é o mestrado na Universidade Federal Fluminense já foi sobre o observatório, a tese de doutoramento dela, que se transformou num livro que ganhou apoio da FAPESP para publicação em Viagens do Tempo, História da Meteorologia no Brasil, também é um trabalho que o Liais é um personagem muito importante, então acho que não teria colega mais, assim, com mais capacidade de aproveitar, apresentar essa mesa, porque o que ela vai fazer é uma mediação, comentários, perguntas e abrir para o debate. Então, muito prazer que eu chamo a Christina Barbosa. E for us, it's a pleasure to have you here, Davi. And I thank you a lot for accepting the invitation to participate of this project.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. Oh, okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. I would like to thank Eluísa Gesteira for the kind invitation. I'm very honored to be here. I'm very honored to be here with Davi, Aubin, and Rogerio, Siqueira. And, well, let me introduce Dr. Aubin. He works at the La Sorbonne, Université Pierre Marie Curie. His PhD, actually his graduation, his undergraduation was in mathematics, right? As well as Rogerio's, but he has a PhD in history at Princeton University in the program in the history of science. And he has many a postdoctoral fellow at the Max Planck Institute Max Planck Institute in Berlin, and among others. He has many publications. I'm not going to stress on that, but of course I have to mention this book here, The Heavens on Earth, which was edited by him with Charlotte Pig and Arthur Simons, and also he has. Okay, so he has a paper in it called Eclipse Politics in France and Thailand, and also the introduction, Observatory Techniques in 19th Century Science and Society, which is very good. I always, when I read it the first time, I realized that it was exactly what I was looking for, the term observatory sciences. And since then, I always recommend this paper, this introduction. So that's it. And another thing that I would like to stress, he has a biography from Emmanuel Liais and another one from Liais, The Two Enemies, in the same book, Biographical Encyclopedia of Astronomers, published in 2007. I thought it very interesting. That's it. So Thanks to be here.
Well, thank you very much for this kind invitation. Thank you very much for this kind invitation and those kind words you said about my work. I'm very happy. It's always a good thing when you realize that people read what you write, and even more when they like what you write. So I'm very happy to be here. Indeed, this little biographical entry that I wrote many years ago now from about Emmanuel Liais was my first encounter with this man, and since I discovered him, I was always very impressed and very fascinated by the many aspects of his work. Since then, of course, Christina wrote a very, very nice book and many other things about him, and I'm a bit self-conscious here presenting something about Liais in front of her, and I hope that it's the start of a discussion and collaboration about on those topics, which I started to explore a bit on my own and with Rogerio when he was there. So I would like to start. What I would like to say, I would discuss mainly his book, which is called "The Celestial Space and the Nature of Tropical Nature." Sorry, and I will try to examine a little bit his idea of space in this book, and I would like to start to question the way in which his conception of space, which you will see is probably very original, was in some sense related to his travels to Brazil, and which is the thing that he summarized in his book. So the book, as you see here, this is the second edition. Rogerio is going to talk a bit more, perhaps, about the history of the book. I'll just show you I'll just stress the title, which is a very strange title because it's the celestial space and tropical nature. What these two things have together, how do you put these two things together, is a very intriguing question already, right? And when you start to read the book, you realize that for Emmanuel Liais, this is not just a nice title or a nice way to put together things that he wants to talk about, but it seems to be very important for him, the relationship between space, celestial space, and his experience in Brazil. So I've selected one quote here, which I can translate to you, in which he expresses that very explicitly. He says that he was traveling in the Brazilian campus. He doesn't translate the word here, and he says that he was always finding new panoramas, new horizons in front of him, and in front of this new paysage, new landscapes that he was exploring, his thought was brought towards the immensity and to the idea that we conceive of space. And a bit further, he goes and he explains the essence of his realization when he says that space from a physical point of view is different than from a mathematical point of view. And I think that when he writes that in 1865, that's a pretty bold statement to be writing. I will present a little bit the background, but I want to just keep in mind perhaps two things. In 1859, just 6 years before Liais wrote the book, and before and after Liais left for Brazil, there was a revival in Europe of the study of the stars, of celestial bodies, especially the sun, in their chemical and physical constitution. That's usually taken as the birth of astrophysics, and it was a famous experiment by two German scientists, Robert Bunsen and Gustav Kirchhoff. Those two scientists with the spectroscope, I just saw that you have very nice spectroscopes here in one of the little cupola, all mounted. You can see the spectrum, it's very nice. And by studying those spectra, Bunsen and Kirchhoff opened a new phase in the history of astronomy, where astronomy became much less concerned with mathematical and computation aspects of it, and even more and more with the chemical and physical constitution of stars. It's a very important change in the history of astronomy. And Liais, in some sense, saying a little bit of the same thing at that time, but from a very different perspective. And as I say, he leaves Europe for Brazil before all of that happens. And he probably has an understanding of it much later. The other aspect I want to bring to the fore is also the fact that mathematical space is also changing. The conception of mathematical space is also changing at the time. I will review that a little bit, but let me say that in 1865, I will just want to say here that in 1865. The idea that there are non-Euclidean spaces and that mathematical spaces can be multiple and that there would be different sorts of mathematical spaces, abstract mathematical space, those ideas are up in the air and they are starting to be accepted by the community. Even though it's been a long time that people have talked about non-Euclidean space, based several decades, since the beginning of the 19th century, it was around this time that mathematical space, non-Euclidean geometry became really widespread in Europe, especially following the work of Riemann, perhaps. And soon, I will emphasize that, Beltrami. So here we are with Liais. At the time, what he says here, it echoes important development in astronomy and in mathematics. At the same time that his reasoning behind all of that is completely different from what European scientists are doing at the time. For him, the path to that realization is through his experience in Brazil. So that's what I would like to explore a little bit further with you here. And I would want to warn you that this is just the beginning of a research, and I think there's still a lot that we can say and do about that. So let me just recall a little bit some few things about Liais. So Liais is known for having been one of the directors of the Rio Observatory, but that's after the time period I'm interested in. He was director, if I remember correctly, maybe you'll remember, from 1874 to 82, something like that? 81. To 81, yeah. That's during his second stay in Brazil. His first trip to Brazil was from 1858 to 1864, when he was not director, but he was in charge of several missions. So Liais is, I would say, a typical observatory scientist, using the phrase that Christina mentioned, that I discussed in the introduction of my book. What I mean by a typical observatory scientist is that he's more or less autodidact. He learned things by himself, and I mean, he went to good schools, but he didn't necessarily went to the university. And he learns astronomical trade or observatory science in the observatory, especially with François Rago first, who was the director of the Paris Observatory when he meets in 1847, and he will be, at the end of a complicated process in which I will not go into, nominated as one of the 4 astronomers of the Paris Observatory in 1854, when there is the reform of the observatory, and the astronomer Aubin Le Verrier, whom I'm going to talk about later, is nominated as the director. In 1857, Emmanuel Liais will even be the vice director of the observatory, But very soon after that, he will have a very strong clash with Le Verrier, which will lead for him to leave his position in a more or less, in a manner that's more or less forced upon him. So he decided to go to Brazil at that time in 1858. So before I enter this trip to Brazil and try to ask why he went to Brazil, I would like to go a little bit further into what I understand as observatory sciences and techniques at around that time, around 1850. What we have set out to do when we worked on that book was to present the fact that in the observatories all over the world at that time, in Europe mostly, but also in other parts of the world, in all of the other parts of the world, in many colonies and almost every independent countries in the world, there was a lot of observatories that were established at that time. And they were established to do a certain set of things, but it's especially to embody, I would say, a coherent set of techniques in a place that was emblematic of modern society. It was very important when you had a new state to establish a new observatory. It usually went hand in hand. Those techniques that we discuss in the book, and I will try to make them a bit more concrete, are very different. I mean, they are theoretical. There are some ways of handling theory. They are observational, some ways to interact with observation and instruments. They are technological. Many technologies are very specific to observatories, including the telescope, but not only, of course. Clocks, everything that has to do with the production of number, often. And those techniques are also social, in the sense that there are ways to organize people in the observatory and people around and also the observatory is also a place where you understand sometimes the way to organize time, social events, space, cartography, and sometimes even statistics. So in the observatory, all of those techniques are displayed. And what we wanted to emphasize in the book is the fact that they are coherent. They are not, from today's perspective, it's often difficult to understand why so many different sciences and topics were pursued at the same time in the observatory, but it is very important to understand that they were really coherent. And again, I will try to make that clear a bit later. So, just to emphasize a few things, a few general things. Strong links with the state. It's very important at that time. Many of the observatories are state observatories. You can have private observatories and there are many in the world, but usually the link with the state is very important. The mathematical expertise is very important in the observatory, of course. It's a place where people do mathematics at a high level, in great quantities. And there is also a technical expertise also in the observatory. And I would also emphasize the fact that in terms of topic, object, even though they are very wide, the topic and sciences that are studied in the observatory, they usually have to do with the physical environment. By which I mean ideas about the Earth and the sky, and if you want to go into the discipline, physics, navigation, cartography, or meteorology are the main sciences that are represented in the observatory. I would also like to emphasize the fact that these observatories have a symbolic power, because you have here in the observatory people who are professionals in the science. It's usually very rare in some countries to have people who are paid only to do science in the 19th century. And the astronomers are certainly, observatory directors are certainly very prominent in that position. And their position between the state and the public, because they often have a huge or a large audience, usually addressed to a number of people. All of these aspects are what we called observatory sciences and techniques at that time, and it is the context from which Liais comes. I just want to go a little bit further into this observation of what it is, the observatory tradition, and how it is changing at the time of Liais. First of all, let's say that the observatories have a long tradition, at least in Europe at the time. There are some ideals of observatories. The observatory of Tycho Brahe in between Denmark and Sweden is usually taken as the ideal. But the broad observatories that were founded in Paris and Greenwich in the 1660s were very important. In fact, we don't find any other usage of the word observatory before the Paris Observatory. And so the word was invented to describe what was going on in Paris in a certain sense, but very rapidly used all around the world for other observatories. So that they have a very strong identification with an origin point, I would say. They have a set of techniques, as I said, which are very characteristic in this long tradition. First of all, the numerical table is the center of all the attention in the observatory. They are working on tables, they are producing tables, they are transforming those tables. Basically, it's the observatory as a factory of numbers. It has a long tradition, right, to manipulate those numbers. But it's not always the only thing that they do, since they are really also connected with the cartography, the idea of cartography. They like to map stars and the Earth, and they map it in a specific way. Here you see on this map of the heavens by Hevelius, from the 17th century again, you see those squares, and that's the very important part of it. It's because you can mathematize those maps. Those maps are, in a certain sense, a representation of numbers as well, right? And it's not a map that is disconnected with the coordinates. So it's very important as well in the observatory tradition. There is, of course, an instrumental tradition in the observatory, which is often, it's very central to the observatory, but it's often done elsewhere as well, because the instruments are often made in workshops, in specialized workshops in collaboration with astronomers. And as I will discuss, the astronomers know their instruments very well. They are very interested in their instruments, but they don't usually make them. And perhaps that's very important as well. And then, of course, in the observatory, they produce cosmologies. Here you have the famous model of Tycho Brahe, where the sun is at the center of the Earth is at the center of the universe, and the sun and the planets orbits around the Earth. But that's also one of the things that observatories are important. It's an important production of the observatories and the observatory tradition. So I want you to keep all that in mind when we look at what Liais is doing, because I think he's also building some cosmologies. In the 19th century, early in the 19th century, late 18th century perhaps even, there is a search for a new model for observatories in Europe. I have here two examples, one from the observatory that was built for Gauss in Göttingen in color, and the other one is a plan for an observatory designed by Cassini the Fourth in the early 19th century, where he says, what would be the ideal observatory. In the meantime, the observatories have become scientific space. That's what seems to be indicated by those drawings. They are built for that purpose. They are built around the instrument. That's the new ideal, the new model. So they will become at that point, the perfect embodiment of a way to perform science. You won't be doing experiments and observation anywhere anymore. You will have a space that is specifically designed for that. And again, when you look around here, you realize that is the way in which this place was built. You were built around the instruments and not the other way around. So it's very important to notice that aspect of this new model of observatory science in the 19th century. It will changes a little bit the organization of the observatory. If you look at the Paris Observatory, where Liais started his work in the early 1850s, it was also turned into a factory in a certain sense. Even though the old Paris Observatory was an old building that was not very well suited to do astronomy and astronomers often complain about this fact. The people in the 19th century, they wanted to transform the space so that it would be a mirror to this new ideal. So this observatory here that you see in this representation, scattered representation of the observatory, you see that all the spaces are devoted to science. There's nothing else in this representation, perhaps except the landscape that you see at the bottom, that would represent the observatory as a place where people live, where people did other things, could have gardens, for example, or would do other things than just research. So it's very, again, you have this idea of a space that is completely devoted to science, that excludes the outside world in a way that's very, very important. Excluding the outside world was one of the projects of Le Verrier when he took over the observatory in 1854. You wanted to get rid of some of the light pollution. So Le Verrier had the street lighting around the observatory change to have a darker neighborhood. You wanted to have less vibration, so even the pavement of the streets around the observatory was changed so that it would give less vibration to the observatory. So this way of excluding the outside world was very, very important for the observatory. So you see that there are other, again, when I mention observatory techniques, I think that these techniques of isolations are very important. But you see that there are some other sort of techniques, again, in this representation, where you see people doing computation. It's not just about the instruments. That's what I want to emphasize with this slide. Okay, let's move on a little bit. This technical space, as the observatory is now conceived of, it's a place where you put a lot of value on precision and where you have high technology. I don't need to emphasize that. You've seen those big telescopes, you've seen those clocks who are of high precision, and you probably have an idea that the whole machinery of the observatory is oriented towards getting that higher precision. And again, the number will stay at the center of the observatory. They will become even more important as a product of the observatory. The philosopher Jan Hacking has talked about the avalanche of printed numbers at the time in every field, but the observatory is the place where you have the most of those numbers that are produced and manipulated, computed all the time. But there are new ways of manipulating the numbers which are emerging at the time, especially in terms of mathematical analysis. New theories, Le Verrier is very important for writing all of these new theories of planets, which leads first to the discovery of Neptune and then perhaps the discovery of another planet closer to the Sun. So this is a very crucial aspect of it. And I don't mention it here, but also in the development of probability theory, error theory, statistics, they are a very interesting development occurring in the observatory because of that culture of numbers. Well, I started to talk about geometry, right? And we could discuss whether or not the observatory has a very interesting relationship with geometry. This has proved controversial and the object of some debate. There are people who claim that Gauss, Carl Friedrich Gauss, the German astronomer from Göttingen, was led to some form of non-Euclidean geometry. The idea that when you have a curved space, you don't have parallels anymore. Then by his work in geodesy. So Gauss, as an astronomer in Göttingen, was obviously involved in measuring the Earth and measuring and producing maps of Germany. And at some point, and that's a story that's often told, he measured a very big triangle between three mountains. And if you look at the way in which he had the precision for those measurements, the measurements of the angles was greater than the correction due to the terrestrial curvature. So that means that he might have had the idea that space was curved around that experiment. And again, this is very complicated because you have to go into a lot of details to understand really what's happening there. Of course, the Earth is curved, has a sphere. What's important is the Euclidean geometry behind that, or the geometry behind that is curve or not, and that is something that is not necessarily clear in Gauss's thinking. And there's been a few historians that have written about that, and I want to just point to that. I can give you the reference if you're interested. I won't go into the details here. What I would like to say is that this relation, this thinking about space, about non-Euclidean geometry in the 19th century was very much related to the observatory culture. If you look at the people who are the most important for the development of non-Euclidean geometry, the early ones, like Liais or Lobachevsky in 1827, as well as people who are less known, like Schweikart, you realize that they have a conception of space that is very much linked to the observatory culture in some respect. The clearest perhaps is Lobachevsky, who was director of an observatory himself and was involved in geodetic space when he imagined what he called imaginary spaces, which was one of the first examples of non-Euclidean space. The same thing is true of Schweikart, who was not an astronomical observer, was not a director of an observatory, but he imagined that this geometry could be the geometry of space, and he called it astral geometry. Liais, as a military engineer, was a bit further from the observatory culture, but pretty much well versed into the ideas of surveying, which is very typical of the observatory culture of the time. And as I mentioned, in 1860s, the idea that non-Euclidean geometry could really be an important important new mathematical idea was taking hold, and especially through the development of the pseudosphere, the analysis of the pseudosphere by Eugenio Beltrami, an Italian mathematician. And again, in this case, the connection with the observatory is not very important, but what I want to say is that at that time, the realization that they were not just imaginary spaces, but perhaps something much more important about the nature of mathematics that was going on there was taking hold, and Liais is also discussing this sort of things at that time. So let me go back to Liais. Liais, as I said, in 1857 has a clash with the director of the observatory that you see here, Le Verrier. He he wants to do something else, and so he asked his superior, I would say Le Verrier's boss, which is the Ministry of Public Instruction, Victor Duruy, to give him a mission, to send him to Brazil. So he has this idea of going to Brazil because he has some family ties, family connections there. He proposed a program in which, again, in a very, I would say, normal observatory science kind of way, he wants to study two things, basically. Trade routes in the Atlantic, trying to find the shortest and the fastest path across the Atlantic, especially using the right wind patterns. This is a program that's pursued in the United States by the director of the Naval Observatory called Maury at that time, very vigorously. There was a congress in Brussels in 1853, organized by another observatory director, Adolphe Quetelet, specifically on this topic. And Liais, as I mentioned, was involved in meteorology at the Paris Observatory. So it's very understandable that he would try to do that type of studies. He has some contact with the Board of Trade in Bordeaux, and perhaps that helps him to go into that direction. The other idea is that he wants to observe the 1858 solar eclipse that will happen in the southern hemisphere. It will not be visible in Europe, and it might be a good occasion for him to go. It's very interesting when you look at his files at the Archives Nationales to see how people are reacting to this proposal. So you have here Hervé Faye, who's one of the astronomers in which the minister has the most trust, I would say. He is represented a bit old here, but he's a bit younger at the time. He will be asked to give an opinion about this mission, and all in all, you can see that he has a pretty positive reaction. And in fact, he says, that the son and the government of the emperor, in France also there was an emperor at the time, belonged to everyone. In the sense that it's not only the observatory that can carry out research in astronomy, but also private citizens who can be sponsored by the state. But in fact, it doesn't work that well, and Liais is not so well encouraged by the French state when he goes to Brazil. He has a few instruments that are lent to him by the army, but will not receive any payment from the French government to do that. He has the official stamp of a mission, which will help him once he arrives in Rio, but he doesn't have any payment from the government due to his mission. I skip completely, because of time, the discussion of what he does when he's in Brazil to focus on the book. In a few words, he spends 6 years here. Right away, he will join a mission that's been organized by the Emperor Don Pedro II to go and observe the eclipse in the south of the country, and will come back to Rio, and in very shortly after that, we'll get an official commission to go and map out a few rivers. But I don't want to enter into those details here. It would take a lot of time, and I would like to focus on the book to remain on my topic. And as I said, Rogerio will talk a little bit more about the book, so I'll go and talk about the inside of the book. Well, I want to focus on some of one of a striking aspect of the book, which I think deserve more study, is the idea of the illustrations of the book. And especially in the second edition from 1882, you have those very nice color photos and Rogerio is going to show a few of them as well. And what I want to focus here is not necessarily the story of these images, which were produced by his wife, Emmanuel Liais' wife, who's presented here, as well as a naturalist from Rio called Ladislao Neto, and they were both of their pictures, the pictures of both of these persons will be reinterpreted then by this artist called Yann Darjon in Paris. What I want to emphasize is the fact that the reason why Liais included those pictures, very striking pictures in the book, very unusual for a book on astronomy, was all again to give an idea of his experience of tropical nature, of his trips. And he emphasizes the truth to nature aspect of these illustrations, and the fact that he wants to represent the reality without exaggeration of the nature that he was working with. So you will remember that when I presented the observatory techniques, the idea was to get the world outside of the observatory and to preserve yourself as much as possible from that influence. And Liais here is doing the complete opposite in a sense, because he's letting, you would imagine that he's letting the world, the outside world, penetrate his world of observation. But I think it would be a wrong impression to do that. What he's trying to do is he's trying to understand as much as possible this outside his environment in order to be able to get rid of it in his observation, so to make abstraction of that environment. And he finds it very difficult because he finds this environment quite overbearing, and in many different aspects, quite menacing, and in fact at some point in some aspect dangerous. So let's look a little bit at the table of content of this book. Again, I want to emphasize the aspect of 5 minutes is fine, or 5. Yeah. Okay. I think. In this table of content, you will see again the very strange nature of the book, and again, Rogerio will discuss a little bit more how it is difficult to categorize that book. But I want to show you that by first of all looking at this table of content. So you see that there is an impression of very scattered topics in this table. You start with reflection about space. Okay, that's fine in a book on astronomy. And then you study the sun. Okay, that's also very traditional in a book of astronomy to study the sun, which is at the center of the solar system. And then right away, Liais jumps to some completely other topic, the climates, right? And he focuses on Earth, and he focuses a lot on what he's experiencing in the tropics. Goes back to astronomy, to study the moon. And then, again, breaks the flow of the chapters. He has introduced the sun, he has introduced the moon, he's going to talk about eclipse, that makes sense, but he talks about very specific instances, very specific experiences that he has of solar eclipses, one in 58 and one in, I don't think it's 55, I think it's 50, but I might be wrong, 60, I might be wrong, 65, yeah, okay. He then goes on to discuss another discovery of his called zodiacal light. Let me backtrack a little bit. When he talks about solar eclipses, Liais is not only talking about his expeditions to go see and observe the eclipses, but he's also engaging into recent and current topic in the study of eclipses and the study of the physical and chemical constitution of the sun. Liais believes that the corona, the sort of bright shadow that you see around the sun in an eclipse, is perhaps an atmosphere of the sun, and he wants to show that this is an atmosphere of the sun, and his two expeditions seem to indicate that to him. So when in this book, which is a book about the popularization of science, some philosophical reflection, travels, he also includes his own theories about the sun and theories about a topic that is very current at that time in astronomy, very, very debated at that time. So now I move to zodiacal light. Again, zodiacal light is something that you observe. He observed during his crossing from France over the Atlantic in a boat. Usually you can observe that only then when there's very few lights around, and it's a sort of shadow, a bright shadow again, that you can see along the zodiac constellation. And Liais is somebody who puts a lot of emphasis on that in his writing, and is sometimes presented as one of the astronomers who have done the most research on it at that time. And again, Liais is presenting their current astronomical research. He moves to comets, because during his stay in Brazil, he had the chance to observe many comets, and in fact was one of the first to observe one of those comets. And with the description of these comets, again, you will find in his book a very, very interesting going back and forth motion between the description of the comets, some theories about the comets, what they're made of, how do they travel, things like that, and descriptions of the places where he observed the comets. There's a very nice description of the Bay of Rio in the chapter 8 on comets. There are descriptions of strips to different places in other chapters, as well as an observatory that he puts in a place called Olinda. And then he goes back to a more traditional way of presenting things. He discusses the inner planets, Mercury and Venus, discusses the Earth as an astronomical object, discusses a bit the meteors with very striking plates again of phenomena that he says he has observed in Brazil, studies the physics of the Earth and the outer planets, and again will be discussing after that very current issue, very controversial issues, and very heated debates that he wants to put to the fore. So he has a theory that his former boss, with whom he had a big clash, really was a very lucky guy when he discovered Neptune, and in fact his computations would probably not have been able to discover the planet if it was in any other part of its orbit. So he presents in this book again his claims that Le Verrier really shouldn't be given any credit for the discovery of Neptune. And so there's a little bit of polemic again in this aspect of the book, and the polemic extends to the chapter 19, where he also opposes Le Verrier's claim that he could detect a planet inside the orbit of Mercury, because Mercury has a motion that's not completely understood by astronomers. It will take 50 years before Einstein would give a convincing explanation of why there is anomalies in the orbits of Mercury. Le Verrier had another idea that maybe there was some planets between the Sun and Mercury that was very difficult to observe, but could have an effect on Mercury, and sometimes thought that it had been discovered. And Liais is very critical of that approach again, and as you see, the chapter is really about the absence of those planets. And it goes on with shooting stars and nebula, cosmic clouds, so it goes away from the center, away from the Earth, away from the Sun, and goes back into planetary space, and he has a theory on the propagation of light in this outer space at the end. So he's going back to these physical properties of the space. And again, from here and there, you will have very interesting and engravings of description. There's a very interesting description of places in Brazil, and engravings that are again there to give you a very striking impression of what it is to be there in a very romantic way. You can see the codes of the picture here. So let me take a few minutes now to just discuss what it is that he has, what is it that he says on celestial space, which is so unusual to me, and which I think is quite mysterious. Why he, not quite mysterious, but why is it that he reaches that is a very interesting, very interesting study. First of all, let's say that his on celestial space is completely presented by Liais as something that comes out from his experience in Brazil. He even titled one of his chapters that those are studies that were pursued in a desert. Of course, what he means by desert here is it's not dry or anything. It's just because it is a place where there is no culture. Right? It's nature and in its purest form. And he wants his work to be the same thing. The philosophical consideration of celestial space will be, for him as well, a voyage off the beaten track, off the beaten path. It's a voyage somewhere other. He wants to bring the reader with him to the solitude of his travel. So he emphasized that, the solitude. What does he say? What does he say about space? To be very brief again, one of his preliminary question is whether or not the laws of nature have a limit to their validity. Whether or not the laws of nature extend to the whole universe, or whether there is a change, a very small change over huge distance in the universe, in the celestial space. He focuses, as I said, on the distinction between physical and mathematical space. For him, they're not the same. He imagined the way in which units are selected in mathematics. They are arbitrary, and you imagine mathematical space as a place where you can move those units across the distance. You can superimpose if you want, any parts of the mathematical space on top of one another, and it doesn't change. It is a space that is uniform in all directions. In this case, it is in this sense it is very much not a non-Euclidean space, if you want. What he says is that the physical space is probably very different from that. It's very different because he says that if you want to transport a unit of measurement, an actual unit of measurement, a meter, for example, from one place to another, it will experience change. And if it experiences change, then it means that there is some sort of relativity in space. And it's very interesting that to see how he discusses that, the way in which it could also apply to the Earth, because even on the Earth you can have little changes in your units, your measurement units, that will affect what you can say about dimension of space on the Earth. And if you can say that on the Earth, it will be even more about for difference of measurements outside of the Earth, and especially over large expanses of space. It is intriguing to see how much the experience of travel is for him a source of his conception of space, or is it just a way of representing his intuition? Is it because he traveled to Brazil that he has this new conception of space, or is it, or does he choose to tell the history of his travel only as a way to illustrate that conception of space? It's not clear. But when you read again some of his striking description, You have here one of them which I like a lot, where he discusses one afternoon how he was riding he rode for a long day across the campus, again using the word in Portuguese, and he sat on the bank to rest. And interestingly enough, he has an illustration for that moment where you can see him resting on the bank of the small stream. He looks at ants that are at his feet, and this observation of the ants lead him to reflections on the relative dimension of things. That's what he tells us. And then he concludes, from the point of view of the absolute, the little errors, like the ants, are not negligible, they are immense, right? What is one to make of a story like that, right? Again, I'm trying to emphasize, I'm trying to figure out how much this experience of mundane experience, if you want, is for him really the start of a reflection, or whether he thinks that description is a good way to go into and try to touch his conception of space. Again, we might discuss a few of his insights in more detail, but I choose just to remain brief, to tell a bit more about the way in which he has an idea of relativity, which is very interesting in his book. I mean, I will stress that I don't want to claim at all, by any means, that Liais might have influenced Einstein in any matter, right? But what I want to say is that some of the reflection on relativity here are not completely away from the reflections that are very important for Einstein or people before him, like Poincaré, who was, as Tatiana knows very well, very much involved in the observatory culture of measuring space, time, and space on Earth as well as in the sky. What he said, in his book, he mentions relativity. And the last part of this slide is a quote from Liais. Or they all quote from Liais, but when he says, "Born to an essentially relative life, man is that only perceives what is relative. The absolute for him is a chimera." What he wants to show is, is that there is a strong relativism in the human knowledge. But it's not just relativism, it's really a relativity that can perhaps be studied scientifically. He is really in an aspect where, in a conception where he first of all establishes relativism rather than relativity, by which I mean the fact that there are things that you cannot know because of your relative position to the world, and the relativity is in the fact that you know that things are changing, but you are able to study how they change, right? Because of your position relative to the world. So he is first of all trying to establish this relativism, and I think moving towards some sort of relativity. And what's very interesting that you focus, you'll see that you see that on the transparency. He is describing some relativism in time and some relativism between time and space in a very interesting way. The idea of measuring space contains necessarily the idea of time, since one needs to assume that the unit has been transported, and the idea of measuring time contains the idea of space. So for him, there is really a great connection between the two. Okay, I want to conclude. And open up a little bit. Again, as I said, I don't want to claim any influence, any direct influence, though the reception of the work could be better known, because it's difficult to know how people read Liais. And again, Rogerio has some very important clues that he will give us after that. But I think you can see those very original ideas that emerge from the text. The distinction between mathematical and physical space, the relativity of time and physical space. How are those ideas emerging from his experience, the realities of astronomical observation in tropical terrain, in the case of Liais, would be very interesting to know in more detail. And again, another aspect as well is to discuss a little bit this impression, Liais' own impression sometimes, at least that's the impression that he wants us to have, that he's going to a desert. Because in fact, the tropical nature that he encounters is already heavily mediated culturally. He's not the first one to experience it. Of course, everybody around him is experiencing it and knows how to make sense of this tropical nature, and they're also helping Liais in shaping his own idea of what tropical nature is. I mean, I'm talking about the astronomers and naturalists, Brazilian, who are traveling with him, and it is long discussions that he has with the emperor and with everybody that is traveling with him. All of those things, I think, would be very interesting to know more in detail. So I'll leave it at that, and I think I will be happy to answer questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was I could listen to you for the rest of the afternoon, but still I would like to call the next speaker, Rogerio. I think maybe the talks will be complementary, and we can leave the questions to the end. Well, Rogerio Monteiro Siqueira, de Siqueira, he is also a mathematician, and also his PhD is in mathematics at Unicamp. He has postdoctoral studies developed at Université Pierre-Marie Curie, maybe it's here, no? In 2012, and also in Sevilla, Spain, in a little bit earlier. He has many publications, many in mathematics itself, and well, I would like to stress a paper, a chapter of a book that was published last year, called Mathematics as a Social Differentiation Factor, Men of Letters, Politicians and Engineers in Brazil through the 19th century. I think it's in a book called Trends in the History of Science. I think it's more in the way you are following now. So, please.
Obrigado, Christina. Antes de qualquer coisa, eu queria agradecer a Luísa, a Lolo, pelo convite, por essas tentativas de colaboração que a gente tem feito nos últimos anos. Agradecer a Christina também pela apresentação gentil. E Tatiana também, que a gente está tentando fazer coisas juntos, né? Eu tinha preparado a apresentação em inglês. E depois de uma longa discussão aqui na frente, e eu já tinha apresentado a minha apresentação, feito uma apresentação um pouco para o Davi. Ele falou assim, bom, eu já sei, eu sou o único que vou falar inglês, então apresento em português para o resto da turma. Então eu vou falar em português, tá certo? O meu interesse no Espaço Celeste do Liais começou por conta de uma parte da minha pesquisa que está um pouco direcionada para a questão da história da edição científica no Brasil. A gente tem um grupo de pesquisa lá com alunos, a gente já apresentou disciplinas na pós-graduação sobre a arte da edição, focando bastante na questão da materialidade da produção, né? Quanto custa, quem é que vende, que condições que vende, como é que os aspectos materiais da obra vão incidir na difusão de determinadas ideias. Essa era um pouco da toada do trabalho, e foi assim que eu cheguei um pouco no Liais, no Espaço Celeste. Conectado também com a minha ida para Paris, e o Davi estava muito interessado no Liais, e como eu era do Brasil, ele falou assim, vamos tentar trabalhar um pouco juntos, e aí foi aí que a gente se reuniu, e depois de um tempo eu mostrei para ele os trabalhos da Christina, e a gente foi tentando trabalhar na questão. Então, a minha fala entra um pouco no tema que eu estou colocando aí, da perspectiva dos vendedores de livros, né, dos booksellers. O que a gente pode dizer do Espaço Celeste? Quer dizer, a gente tem um longo caminho que os livros percorrem, desde o seu escritor até o leitor lá na outra ponta, e evidentemente que, se a gente pensar que há diferentes imagens sobre o livro, diferentes leituras sobre o livro durante esse processo. A minha pergunta qual seria a vista, né? Quais seriam as imagens que os vendedores de livros tinham sobre o Espaço Celeste? E como isso poderia eventualmente determinar a leitura que os leitores vão fazer do livro? Quando a gente vai para uma livraria, o editor e o livreiro escolher um lugar específico para colocar o determinado livro lá. E você, em geral, vai naquelas prateleiras que te interessam. Isso já dá um certo recorte. Você vai encontrar os livros num determinado lugar. E, às vezes, por diversos efeitos ali daquele processo de escolhas do livreiro, faz com que você conheça outros autores que você não conhecia por contaminação, vamos dizer assim. Então é um pouco desse tipo de problema que eu estou interessado em trabalhar aqui. Bom, a primeira coisa que eu teria que dizer é que o Liais publicou em francês, tem outras obras, mas essas são as principais, 4 obras pelas mãos de um editor francês, Louis-Baptiste Garnier, que se estabeleceu no Brasil por volta dos anos 40 do século XIX. O Garnier não é o único editor francês que a gente conhece nesse período, ao contrário, a gente tem uma longa tradição de livreiros franceses que se estabelecem no Brasil, que vão ser personagens fundamentais para a circulação de livros entre os dois polos. Então, aí tem uma outra tentativa nossa de trabalhar a questão, é que assim, há uma circulação de ideias, né, entre os dois lugares, mas essa circulação de ideias ela não se faz sem personagens circulando, como é o caso do Liais, mas sem uma estrutura, um mercado de livros, de revistas e de livros especializados que fazem esse trânsito entre um lado e o outro, tá certo? Então, o Louis-Baptiste Garnier é um dos personagens mais importantes do mundo livreiro do século XIX, que vai editar desde os mais importantes autores que a gente conhece, Machado de Assis, por exemplo, foi editado pelo Garnier, até outros livros, como foi o caso aqui dos livros científicos do Liais. A primeira edição de 1865, a edição que você tem aqui, Cristina, é de 81, é a mais ilustrada, né, a mais bonitona. Essa é a primeira versão da edição do Espaço Celeste. Aí eu já poderia fazer um primeiro comentário para vocês, é que enquanto a gente está vendo aqui o livro chapado, escaneado, sem cor, num tamanho todo modificado, quando a gente pega o livro ali na mão, a sensação é de outra ordem, né? Quer dizer, então tem uma série de pequenas marcações que essa circulação do livro modifica com o tempo e depende do suporte, né? Então a primeira coisa que a gente pode perceber entre a mudança da primeira edição e da segunda edição é que vocês veem que aqui eu tenho uma foto mesmo colorida, e ele escolhe capas, frontispícios diferentes. Então, enquanto aqui no primeiro caso a gente está vendo um sujeito num cavalo com um raio caindo no meio do campo, assim, que tem muito a ver com essa questão que ele se preocupa muito com o raio, com a tormenta, que vai muito na linha do trabalho que a Christina fez, que é sobre meteorologia. Ela pegou o trabalho do Liais e trabalhou um tantão sobre como que era a meteorologia no Brasil e tudo mais. Esse, quer dizer, um pedaço, né? Esse é um possível caminho de interpretação, que está colocado aqui no frontispício do livro. Evidentemente, quando a gente passa para a segunda edição, a gente já vê lá Saturno, é uma coisa colorida, é diferente. E ele muda o frontispício interno, que seria o equivalente àquele outro. Aqui ele coloca a paisagem, os coqueiros, aquilo que poderia ser alguma coisa, algum fenômeno, um arco-íris talvez, que dá outro impacto na leitura do livro. Então é esse tipo de pista que eu estou querendo tentar explorar com vocês. É daqui, que é do lado esquerdo, ali, que o Davi tirou aquela gravura do Liais nos slides dele. Bom, depois ele publica outros livros. Certamente o Espaço Celeste é o livro mais cheio de gravuras dos livros que o Garnier vai publicar. E aí eu queria me deter com vocês numa primeira listagem que o Garnier oferece para os seus leitores, né? Então, qual é a maneira de a gente tentar pensar na perspectiva do livreiro? É ir atrás dos catálogos que eles ofereciam naquele momento. Como que a gente vendia? Fazia longos catálogos, que às vezes eram oferecidos para os leitores, eles diziam que podiam enviar para muito longe os catálogos se você estivesse interessado, mas dentro das obras apareciam catálogos também, pequenas listas de livros. Nesse caso, o Garnier escolheu apresentar só as obras do Liais que ele tinha na casa dele, né? Na maison dele, na maison d'édition. Essa lista aí é a lista de 1876. E uma primeira coisa que a gente tem que perceber é valores e formato. Quer dizer, a gente vem de cima ali 1/8, a gente tem que pensar aqui. Como é que eu vou explicar isso para vocês? Você tem um formato fólio, que é o formato maiorzão, mais ou menos um negócio desse tipo. E aí no meio você tem a metade disso, depois você tem a metade, e aí assim, aí que vai aparecer 1/8, 16, que você dividir em 16 pedaços a grande folha. Então, em 16 e em tanto, são formatinhos menores, em oitavos são maiores e o em folha é o maior deles, né? Então aí você já começa a entender essas diferenças de preço e esses formatos que ele está tentando propor aí para vocês. O em exos é um formato um pouquinho maior, modificado do em oitavo. É claro que o preço não depende só do tamanho, mas depende do volume de páginas, mas depende também das ilustrações. Esse caso, que a gente vai ver daqui a pouco, é um livro luxuoso, vamos dizer assim. Se a gente seguir o trabalho da Christina, a gente vai ver que esses livros, pelo menos 3 deles, os 3 últimos daquela minha lista, tinham interesses bastante específicos e apareceram num acordo, né, entre o governo imperial e o Liais, que tinha objetivos muito específicos, né? Primeiro, que ele pretendia ser um estudo detalhado do Rio das Velhas e do Rio São Francisco, por isso os campos brasileiros, que o Davi falou muito. Então ele não vai para qualquer lugar, ele vai para um lugar que o governo imperial está interessado, né? Ele também está interessado em investigar, esse faz parte do contrato dele, né? Investigar as condições de navegação dos 2 rios, indicando possíveis melhoramentos de maneira a conectar o norte com o sul do país, né? Por meio do seu interior. Tem uma questão muito importante nesse momento, que é, discute-se muito qual poderia ser um bom lugar para a capital do Brasil, que não fosse no litoral, né? Então, essa é uma questão que está colocada, entrar dentro, melhorar a cartografia, melhorar as condições, e pensar em maneiras de conectar o sul com o norte, eram questões importantes nesse momento. O Liais entra nesse contexto também de trabalho. Escrevi seu nome errado aí, Christina. E também ele tinha um objetivo de descrever a flora, a agricultura, a fauna, a distribuição demográfica, as formações geológicas do clima e os fenômenos meteorológicos, né? Então, isso quer dizer que, por um lado, ele tem tarefas de um astrônomo típico, mas ele também tem tarefas de o que a gente poderia chamar de um naturalista, de alguém que vai a campo, tipicamente no modo do começo do século XIX, como a gente conhece. Daí, talvez, seja uma das razões que a gente vai conseguir ver uma série de gravuras descrevendo o território. Isso vai fazer com que o Espaço Celeste vai ter, e as outras obras, elas vão ter quase como se papéis de coringa. Elas vão servir para alguma coisa num determinado momento, mas elas vão aparecer em outro momento como outras leituras. Elas vão se permitir várias leituras por conta dessa especificidade. O Davi acabou de falar de como ele mistura temas de astronomia com território e com questões que ele está pesquisando ao mesmo tempo. Então, essa maneira pouco usual da gente ter que escrever, a gente teria que inscrever ele nos livros de astronomia, faz, por um lado, dessa sensação de que temos aqui alguma coisa que não é exatamente uma coisa de astronomia, mas, por outro lado, permite leituras e permite inscrever o livro em outras chaves. Tá certo? Então, o que é interessante, por exemplo, é que naquela nota de página aqui embaixo desse quadrinho que vocês estão vendo aqui, o Garnier apresenta o Liais como alguém interessado em astronomia, matemática, física, geografia, física do globo, meteorologia, mecânica, óptica e física propriamente dita, ele diz. É um sujeito bastante variado, amplo, bem mais amplo do que o astrônomo que a gente estava descrevendo no começo. Certo? Então aí a gente tem que pensar também que tem as estratégias do editor tentando apresentar o autor, né? As diversas memórias do autor, que são por volta de duas centenas de como é que traduz isso direito? 250, é isso? Eu pirei. Tratam desses temas que vocês estão vendo aí. Então, apesar das intenções do governo brasileiro, dos autores e dos editores, a gente deveria pensar a recepção e a circulação desses livros considerando ações, né? Sempre lembrando, para mim, que são 2 textos fundamentais. Primeiro, um texto do Darwin, que vai falar sobre a história do livro, que ele vai descrever o caminho que o livro vai fazer desde a mão do autor até o seu leitor, e como a gente deveria pensar não só o livro como parte de um processo muito pequenininho, mas tentar ver ele em perspectiva, dentro dessa grande roda de produção. E um outro texto que eu gosto muito, que é do Chartier, que ele vai insistir nas modificações que um livro vai recebendo conforme o tempo está passando, especialmente seus paratextos. O que ele quer dizer com paratexto? Título, introdução, as figuras às vezes, mas também todo esse conjunto de informações que vão ser uma espécie de carro uma espécie de abertura, né? Uma espécie de primeira leitura que você vai fazer do livro. Você vai pegar, vai olhar e pensar, ele se trata de tal coisa. E é a partir dali que você vai começar a fazer a sua interpretação do texto. Então, por isso que eu também insisti em comparar os dois frontispícios de 1860 e 1880, porque aparentemente há intenções se modificando aí no meio do tempo pelas mãos do editor. Tá certo? Então, são essas duas coisas que estão na minha cabeça quando eu estou analisando o livro e vou tomando esses conselhos em conta, né? O que a gente poderia dizer a mais sobre os livros do Liais, ou sobre o Espaço Celeste? Então, aí está um pouco desfocado, mas o que eu fiz foi fazer uma espécie de pequena coleção de catálogos de livreiros do século XIX, onde aparece o livro do Liais. Então, o primeiro que vocês estão vendo aí é um trechinho de um catálogo de um livreiro que chamava Livraria Arthur Ribeiro, isso de 1874, e a lista está um pouco desfigurada, mas vocês começam lá em cima, primeiro começa com o Dicionário da Língua Portuguesa, depois L'Espace Celeste, por Emmanuel Liais, um volume com gravuras, encadernado, está vendendo por 6 réis, desculpa, 6 mil réis. Depois, A História do Céu, pelo Flammarion, que é um livro de vulgarização da época, um volume com gravuras, encadernado por 4 réis. Depois, Astronomia Populaire do Arago, que foi o chefe dele lá, mas o que eu queria insistir com vocês aí é que o contexto dado ao livro do Liais nesse momento é um contexto de vulgarização da astronomia, de uso por um público leigo, vamos dizer assim. Isso faz muito sentido nesse período, por conta dos gostos do querido imperador Dom Pedro II, como vocês sabem bem, que era muito afeito à astronomia, mas tudo leva a crer, isso foi uma coisa que eu insisti na última vez que eu vim aqui, tudo leva a crer que não era só Dom Pedro que gostava das artes da astronomia como leigo, mas isso podia ser pensado como se fosse uma arte de corte. Muita gente escrevia e estava interessado sobre isso. A gente tem que estudar isso melhor, mas há elementos para a gente ir nessa direção, né? Faz mais sentido também porque vocês estão olhando que tem uma lista longa de coisas que podem ser livros para pessoas ilustradas do Império do período, onde a gente pode olhar o livro do Liais. Então essa é a primeira abordagem, pensar o livro do Liais como se fosse um livro de vulgarização, de utilização por um público leigo que está interessado em astronomia. Tá certo? Embora a gente saiba, baseado nas pesquisas da Christina e do Davi, tem uma questão da meteorologia bem colocada e tem uma questão de como a gente compreende o espaço. Tá certo? Então, uma segunda coisa que eu queria mostrar para vocês é essa longa lista. Esse é um catálogo de um editor importante desse período. Ele tem uma série de catálogos publicados nos jornais. Ele sempre começa assim: livros baratíssimos, o terror dos careiros, a livraria do povo, assim, pois ao trem e terra, né? Então tem uma coisa assim muito popularesca que ele está explorando aí, mas é só no começo, porque quando você vai começar a ler a lista onde a gente situa o texto do Liais, é uma longa lista de livros, onde todos eles têm gravuras no texto, são sempre de valores altos. 7 mil réis no período é um valor alto para um livro. Em geral, por exemplo, os textos do Conte, que eram ditados em 5 volumes, eram um tantão de coisas, tinha esse valor. Então, dá para ter uma ideia do quanto dos valores, né? Então, você vê que é uma lista longa de gravuras, com preços não muito baratos, e é nela que o livreiro da Livraria do Povo, já esqueci o nome dele agora nesse momento, insere o livro do Liais. Então tem aí uma segunda chave para a gente pensar, que é a chave das gravuras, né? As gravuras bonitas que o Davi mostrou para a gente é uma maneira da gente pensar que talvez esse seja um livro de um mercado de luxo, vamos dizer assim, de livros luxuosos, livros raros, que são utilizados com uma outra finalidade que não a científica, que não a divulgarização para o público leigo, mas para uma terceira coisa, quase como se fossem os livros que a gente conhece hoje. Os book tables, exatamente. Os livros de papel couché, luxuosos, que tem um conteúdo, às vezes, científico, ou que, enfim, a gente tem vários colegas que editam livros desse estilo, mas, às vezes, quem editou o livro foi a Andrade Gutierrez, que fez para distribuir para os seus clientes. Então tem essa questão aí imbricada nessa história toda do que parece que a gente está vendo aqui. O que é interessante nesse caso é que é um sujeito que costuma vender livros baratos, populares, mas é uma lista de livros caros. Só para lembrar vocês, por exemplo, essa é uma gravura de uma arara super colorida. A gente chegou à conclusão de que, como é, Davi? A técnica é cromolitogravuras. Ainda a gente tem que gastar um tempo ainda em entender quais são as técnicas que eles utilizaram, mas é um misto de litogravura. Lito, vocês sabem, né? Impressão em cima da pedra, mas eu acho que é alguma coisa misturada aí. Eu teria que gastar um tempo pensando nas técnicas de impressão, porque eu não consegui avançar nessa questão. Mas de todo modo, quando você pega o livro e folheia, é a primeira coisa que te salta aos olhos, né? Aquele monte de gravura, não são todas coloridas, aquele monte de gravuras super bem feitas, que foram feitas como o Davi acabou. Olha lá, ó, aquele do espectro. Cuidado com o livro. Então, temos aí também uma outra dimensão do livro, que é um livro publicado que fala sobre astronomia e sobre uma viagem ao campo brasileiro, aos campos, né? Mas, por outro lado, especialmente tem a impressão de que depois dos anos 80, a partir da segunda edição, que é a edição mais colorida. É meu palpite, tá certo? Aqui, de novo, um outro catálogo de um livreiro, João Martins Ribeiro. E aqui a gente vê, por exemplo, Les Merveilles de la Science par Louis Figuier, que são livros de vulgarização, que tem a ver com públicos. E aí também tem a ver com uma outra questão do período, né? que os colegas discutem muito, né? A Caroline Carula, a tese dela é sobre, por exemplo, as discussões, uma espécie de cientificismo do período, uma procura, né, por discutir textos científicos. Então o livro entraria dentro dessa casa, né? E aí eu dei um pulo, né, saí dos anos 80 e fui para o final do século XIX, já estamos na República, para mostrar para vocês o catálogo, a bibliografia brasileira, o catálogo das obras francesas e latinas relativas ao Brasil, editado pelo Garreau. Garreau, foi um livreiro muito importante em São Paulo. Ele tinha uma casa de luxo, uma casa de livros, mas de artigos de luxo, que era vendida para a elite paulistana nesse período, e é ele o idealizador desse catálogo de obras francesas que falam sobre o Brasil. Então daí a minha frase, num catálogo para brasilianistas, vamos dizer assim, né? Mas para brasilianistas à la française. Porque a gente tem essa expressão para brasilianistas nos Estados Unidos, né? Então tem aí nesse período a gente estava voltado mais para a França, embora os Estados Unidos já estava entrando no Brasil nesse período, nas discussões, né? Então, aqui a gente vê toda aquela marcação inicial feita pelo Garnier, mesmo pelo Liais, totalmente reembaralhada. Porque o Garreau primeiro ele vai fazer uma longa lista de nomes, o Liais vai aparecer lá com as suas obras, depois ele vai fazer uma longa lista de tópicos sobre o Brasil. Se você quer pensar sobre o Brasil, você deve ler o que sobre Minas Gerais? Você deve ler o que sobre o Rio de Janeiro? Você deve ler o que sobre... Enfim. E aí, dentro desses tópicos, ele vai colocando os livros do Liais, editados durante o 19. E aí é que a coisa que é interessante. Isso aqui é só explicando, falando sobre como que ele quer apresentar o país, que é rico, enfim, para um público francês. Então, primeiras coisas, né? Dentro do catálogo de astronomia aparecem somente 3 tópicos, somente 3 obras. Primeiro, os Anais do Observatório Imperial do Rio de Janeiro, o Boletim de Astronomia do Observatório, e uma terceira obra que são as Explorações Científicas do Brasil, Tratado de Astronomia Aplicada, que não é a primeira obra do Liais, editada pela Garnier. Aqui a gente vê um contexto bem amarradinho, é tudo de astronomia, tudo exatamente sobre o Brasil, e tudo produzido a partir do observatório ou ali na vizinhança, né? Aí a coisa começa a bagunçar um pouco, porque no termo Liais aparece de novo, mas agora no tópico botânica. E ele aparece, o clima, geologia, geografia botânica do Brasil, ele aparece do lado do Márcios, do lado de outros naturalistas que falaram muito do Brasil na primeira metade do 19, né? Então, aí, de novo, quando eu acho que isso amarra um pouco a nossa percepção quando a gente olha aquelas gravuras do espaço celeste e vê aquelas gravuras sobre a fauna ou sobre a flora brasileira, e na hora a gente pensa assim, nas coisas do Spix, do Fomartius, daquele monte de gravuras, os trabalhos da Lorelai Cury, tá cheio dessas referências, né? Quer dizer, então, ele é como se a gente pudesse inscrever o texto alguns dos textos do Liais dentro dessa tradição dos naturalistas que vão descrever o Brasil. Os desenhos não são dele, são da pessoa que estão junto com ele, mas essa é uma visada que a gente poderia pensar, mas essa é uma visada que aparece no final do 19, né? Pelo menos bem marcada nesse catálogo. A gente vai ver nos outros catálogos antigos que elas aparecem também lá, mas é um pouco mais misturado. Também debate sobre o clima, aí faz todo sentido, mas aí não é o Espaço Celeste, ele usa o Climário do Resile, que é uma outra obra. E o interessante, um comentário que o Davi fez quando olhou a lista, é que é o clima versus problemas de mortalidade, problemas médicos, a última, do clima e das doenças do Brasil. Então é uma questão do clima, mas é uma questão marcada também com os problemas específicos que o território poderia dar, né? E o Espaço Celeste aparece onde? Dentro da lista de generalidades. Com livros que vão desde História Natural e Moral das Índias, que é o primeiro texto que vocês têm lá em cima, até Memória sobre o Brasil para servir de guia, aqueles que gostariam de se instalar lá. A última obra dessa lista que vocês estão vendo aí é um guia da Europa ao Rio da Prata, notas sobre o Brasil. Então tem uma pegada muito de viajantes, mas de quem quer conhecer, quem quer viajar para o Brasil, né? E por fim, também ele aparece em questões de geologia e geodesia, né? Que são isso, quer dizer, geodesia certamente é um tema que a gente associaria a ele do período. Também aparece no tópico de hidrografia, porque ele tem aquela questão colocada pelo governo, pelo Império, de que ele tem que descrever melhor a conexão Rio das Velhas São Francisco, então aparece aí. E também aparece coisas sobre Minas Gerais. Olha lá, o mesmo livro que está aqui vai aparecer lá em Minas Gerais, livro ou texto, agora eu acho que no fundo esse é um texto menorzinho. E sobre o Rio das Velhas tem um tópico, sobre o Rio São Francisco também tem uma lista de tópicos, né? Então, só para fechar um pouco o que eu gostaria de fazer, né? Seria importante a gente trabalhar outro conjunto de catálogos, não sei se vocês perceberam, eu deixei passar, mas a maioria dos meus catálogos é a partir dos anos 80, teria que olhar um pouco para os catálogos dos anos 60 e 70 para ver como é que isso apareceu lá. Se naquele período de edição os editores faziam outro tipo de leitura. Eu estou insistindo aqui, quer dizer que a leitura, o modo de a gente ler, o modo de a gente interpretar uma obra é também um processo histórico que vai mudando a depender do contexto, a depender do lugar onde essa obra vai passando. Tá? Então, eu não sairia fazendo conclusões definitivas a partir dos anos 80, pensando o que está acontecendo em 60 e 70. A gente tem que pensar um pouco melhor o que está acontecendo. Essa é a primeira coisa. Mas, algumas menções em jornais que eu também tenho, mas eu não consegui mostrar aqui para vocês, por falta de tempo, e também por falta de tempo para analisar essas menções, sugerem aquilo que eu estava dizendo, né? Que o livro provavelmente foi usado em observações astronômicas, tanto por profissionais da área, né? Aí profissionais põem aspas, muitas aspas, no tema, mas também por um público leigo, né? Gente citando, vi determinado fenômeno, mas o Liais diz que a cauda do cometa tinha que ser assim, 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 assado, no jornal. Né? O livro também foi utilizado como, aí eu digo, como esses livros raros, mas livros também finos, né? Livros luxuosos, né? Muito provavelmente por conta da riqueza das suas gravuras, né? E também ele pode ser pensado como uma maneira de pensar, como a gente pensa o Brasil da perspectiva da França, né? A partir desse conjunto de textos franceses, editados em francês, ao longo do 19. Tá certo? Era isso que eu queria falar para vocês. Obrigado.
Thank you, Rogerio. Very nice talk also. And, well, I think we had an afternoon with Liais. He would be happy to be here to know that we are talking about him. Fala em português? Vamos abrir para as perguntas, né? Let's go to the questions. I have questions, of course, and also comments. I wouldn't like to be the first, but be the first. Okay. So, yeah.
Se alguém quiser fazer pergunta em português para o Davi,
a gente se vira para traduzir um pouquinho de francês, um pouquinho de inglês, espanhol.
botar globalizado.
Antes de mais nada, eu tenho que pedir desculpas, porque eu tenho que sair 4h30, que eu tenho uma reunião, tá? Então, a Heloísa vai conduzir aqui a mesa nos debates, eu espero que sejam acalorados. Então, my comments first. I have many comments, but I will concentrate on two. And based on other authors, I think it's better. One for you, Rogerio, first, and maybe, but it's also for the two of you. Liais published L'Espace Celeste with his own resources, financial resources, and he published it in France. The first edition, at least, and talking about the path of a book from its publishing to its reading, it's impossible. I also have the first edition, which is very, very rare in Brazil. You can find the 1881 edition quite easy, but the first one just in Europe. Just in Europe. It was published in France. Actually, when he signed the second contract with the government, it was established in the contract that he should go to France and publish there Climat, Hydrographie, Traité d'Astronomie, the 3 books, and Ladislau Neto made this complaint. He didn't publish any one of them, and instead he published L'Espace Celeste. That's why the others were late. He complained that. He said that. Oh, he didn't publish. He complained to the Brazilian imperial government. He didn't publish yet because he is interested in publishing his own book. Why am I saying that? Because I noticed it in the list of his publications, a note where he says, where the seller says that the previous book was the one who Arago talked about. This is typically from him. He wrote that. Because he was very proud of it. Arago, the great Arago, sur ses mémoires. It's the previous book listed, which is Le Climat de Cherbourg or something like that. And it was the book, the paper that Arago, supposedly his last notes were about this work. So this is a comment, now the question. There's a thesis of our colleague at Unirio, Cláudia Santos, where it's very recent, she analyzes many French voyages to Brazil and the voyagers' books. Not voyagers' books, it's like the word. Yeah, and not exactly diary. It's more wide than that. It can be the diary, but also a narrative, travel narratives.
That's a scientific book?
No. She classifies in 5 types. I don't remember exactly, but scientists, educators, I don't remember. Commercial, enterprisemen and diplomats. She makes a classification of, I think, 4 or 5. And she supports a very interesting idea that those travelers, they not only reflected or described the social aspects of Brazil, and she's talking specifically on slavery, but they also influenced and took part on the debates. Okay, so now my question. The impression I have, I didn't read the book again now, but I took notes when I was younger. Now I don't have time to do that anymore, so I looked at my notes. And I had the impression, reading my notes, that he's trying to make a kind of a propaganda of Brazil to European, to Europe. So this is my question. Wouldn't he wouldn't he take part of the debates on the end of slavery when he, in his book, in L'Espace Celeste? It's not a commissioned book. The government didn't pay him for that. But when you read the book, you see clearly that he is trying to sell a good image of Brazil, of its population, of its government. So would that be the case? That's my first question. I think I'll do the other. For both of you, what's the impression?
Christina, você fez uma pergunta, well, in English. An important question. In fact, the second part of my research on this problem of the reception is to see the problem of reception in the other side of the ocean in France. So go to the newspapers and see what the people are saying on the book. To see, I don't know if the images developed by the editors or by Liais was accepted by the readers, or how can they react to the book. So I have the impression that Liais is involved with the problem of presenting Brazil for France, especially when we see the catalogue of the Garot. It's exactly the question: what can we speak about Brazil for a France guy or else? But I don't know yet at the moment how was the question of the slavery. I don't have I answer here. I will not. Yes, it's beautiful. It's beautiful, especially in spite of this work, this thesis, which you told to us.
The question is that Liais was trying to get support for some position against slavery.
No, well, he has a very, that's my opinion, I don't know the others, he has a very dubious position. He says, he proclaims he is against slavery, but he has an official position, let's say. He says that it couldn't end like this. Because it would, they had to end it slowly in order to for immigration, to attract immigrants, to replace slaves.
But I can give an answer now. It's a very, very, very interesting question. It's very possible. It's very possible. An idea?
I'm not sure I have an idea of that. I think Liais, I mean, you know very well, his first propaganda is for himself. And then maybe he can do propaganda for other things if it suits his own interest. And I think it's a very interesting point that you're raising. I have the impression that his presentation of Brazil as the nature of Brazil is always a bit ambiguous, because it's always a bit dangerous. It's always connected to.
It's beautiful, but
it's beautiful, but it's dangerous. So as a propaganda, it can work on certain people, but it's also difficult. As for the slavery question, I'm afraid I'm not able to answer anything.
But
he has certainly a good he presents the government in a very, very good manner. He wants to show that it is doing a lot to cultivate, to culture the country, to spread Western and European values, enlightenment in the country. Don Pedro II is presented as a benevolent, enlightened dictator. So yeah, in this sense, I think he's very much behind the forces of civilization that are represented by the government. I mean, that's what he would say. I think, yeah, that's what.
But the question on the payment, it's very interesting. It's a rich book. And how can he pay by own? Well,
He comes from a rich family.
yes, yes. Any questions?
The book came to my hand with a Bible. So first, I would like to thank the presentation. It was fantastic. I don't know if I will be able to make my question, not because of the English, but because it came during the talks, and also the experience that I had last week to take the book. Because I went to the library and there is an exemplar in the National Observatory Library, cited by Louis Cruz, and I was really surprised because of the illustrations. And that stayed in my mind, why the illustrations are here. Why am I asking that? Because I think that's my curiosity. Do they have a role in the book, or they are only illustrating things? Because there is images of eclipses mixed with descriptions. And I was thinking about the model program of Alexander van Humboldt. And I'm not able to develop that, but when he was telling about the space you can measure, but there's something else that the mathematics cannot answer. And then maybe the illustration can be connected also with this kind of program to understand as a whole. At the same time that you have the instrument, the precision, but there is something that cannot be, covered by that. It cannot access.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, if the illustration, okay, they attribute value to the book, for sure. They are really beautiful. And, but I would think the role of the illustration in the book of astronomy, more than only illustrate the book, but to help to give also his, to support his argument. I don't know, I was wondering about that.
As far as I can see, most of the illustrations, if not all of them, are discussed in the text at one point or another. So there are no illustrations
What?
are discussed in the text.
Discussed.
Yeah, or at least they make mention of it, and sometimes it's images of things that were observed or events in his explorations or places where he was. So in this sense, I think they play a role. And I mean, Liais is pretty explicit. I mentioned a little bit that the illustrations were very important to convey to the reader an image as truthful as possible of the place where he was. So why does he do that? I mean, there are several questions now after that. Once you have that, so you can say, well, are they that truthful or not? But why was it important for him to have those images and to say that they are a truthful representation of his environment? And I would go into the direction you suggested, which I think is a very good suggestion, about the limitation of mathematics in this aspect. This book is not very mathematical. Liais is not a very good mathematical astronomer.
And he explains himself about that in the advertisement,
Yeah.
in the beginning.
Exactly.
I just read.
Yeah,
He said,
exactly.
I
Exactly.
excuse my lectures, I'm not speaking a lot about mathematics, but I explain about mathematics in my other book.
Yes, exactly.
I will do
He's
that
like-
next time.
Yeah.
But he's also not a
excusing
very,
himself.
he's not also very good mathematician. It's not his strength. And that's the reason why, I mean, he considers himself more as a physicist to start with, and he does a little bit of astronomy. And that's the reason why he goes into the direction of astrophysics, and it's a good place for the people like him at the time. But he's, so there was in another publication, I tried to develop what is the model for the observatory to universal knowledge. My claim is that when you have laboratory science, the laboratory is a nondescript place. It's a non-place. The laboratory can be anywhere. It doesn't matter where you do your experiments. The laboratory has no characteristic, spatial characteristic at all. And the observatory is very different in this respect. I mean, it's not the terrain, it's not the field where you have a very strong personality of the place where you are doing your experiments or research. The observatory is very different because, I mean, you try to isolate it as much as you can, but you can never isolate it completely because you need to have the roof wide open to get the lights in, and you get everything else, the cold, the wind or whatever. So there's and you get influences of the vibrations, you know, all of those things. So that the observatory was always reaching for being the non-place, but it never can be the non-place. So what they do is, observatories usually have a very, very, very good knowledge of their local place. So the first thing you do when you arrive at an observatory, you study meteorology of the place, and you try to study the geodesy. You make a map of the environment, and you locate that map on the map of the world. And then you go on understanding your place. I mean, one example I've written that I think it's an interesting example. If you look at the œuvre complète of the Arago, the complete works of Arago, the entry on Paris is super large. They have in the index. You have a very nice index in these complete works. And you look to Paris. There's a lot of things about Paris. It's not because, I mean, those Parisians are always looking at Paris as the center of the world. Of course they are, but it's also because you need to know the place where you study from to be able to universalize the knowledge. So you factor this out in a certain sense. And the way you do it is usually mathematical. You can get rid of the variation of temperature. You can take into account where you are on the Earth and how it influences your observation, etc., etc. That's a very common thing in astronomy. It's called reduction. It's a mathematical process, and it's been developing for a long time. What Liais does is some sort of, I would say, a narrative reduction. And I think he wants to take away this overwhelming nature in his observation, overwhelming for him, and he finds different ways to get to universal knowledge, despite the fact that this nature is so overwhelming to him. The illustration is one way, and the descriptions are another way. And I think in the end, it leads him to in fact change his notion of space. So it doesn't succeed in the end because he's not able to do the reduction completely. That's a suggestion I have, but I think it would be more
a kind of catharsis.
Catharsis.
No, like to deal with that as to not have to deal with that. I don't know if I understood.
I understand. I understand what you're saying, and I'm thinking about it at the same time as I'm talking. I'm not sure that the characteristics is the right word. It's not. I mean, I don't think. It would be interesting to study if it really was traumatic for him. I mean, in his letters, it seems traumatic. His wife, he gets sick a lot. His wife gets sick, and she dies a few years later. They attribute that to some sickness that she got here, and he really liked her. He really loved her, and it was really a strong marriage apparently. So there are some traumatic aspect to it, and I don't know if it's the catharsis is a way to deal with the traumatic aspect of it, but I think he wants to, in a certain sense, he wants to do that also on a scientific basis. So there's a scientific use of the images. That's how I would like to think. It's not just a psychological use, but there's also a scientific use of it. I don't know if you agree with what I said.
Yeah, I did it. I don't know if I understood that, because you were saying he uses the figure as a way to deal with this overwhelming nature, and as a way to put it aside, as not to deal with. That's what I'm trying to understand. I don't know if I understood.
Yeah. What I mean is that the nature that he encounters, he finds it so different from what he's used to, that in a certain sense it could put into question his ability to produce universal knowledge, and especially knowledge that would be important and talked about for European purposes. His goal when he writes that is to come back to Europe. He doesn't want to come back to Brazil, I don't think so. I think he wants to stay in Europe and has a position there and settle, right? So his goal is to make his knowledge, the knowledge that he has tried to produce in Brazil, being a knowledge that will find its place in Europe, where it's going to be universal because it's in Europe, right? So, if you want. And to make his knowledge universal, it seems to me he has to study the local condition much more than you find in other books on astronomy. And that's why, because if he knows the local conditions, if he has studied them enough, then he can say all of the things that I've produced are not due to the local conditions. They are universal, so they can be inserted in the knowledge of European astronomers. That's what I want to say.
But also we have that engraving with Liais do Pedro. Yes, beautiful. In Recife, in Olinda. So there is a majority of figures engravings connect with the scientific thought. But there, for me, it's a way to connect with the king. For me, especially when we see, for me, who studied the books at the beginning, the first half of the 19th century, it's where the king, it's always in the first page, attributed for Dom João V, Dom João VI, Dom Pedro, etc. Now the king illustrated, it's in the book, mixed with the production of science. It's another way of presenting the illustrated king, Dom Pedro II. So it's connected with the text of Liais. He describes the voyage, when Dom Pedro goes to Olinda, etc., etc., etc. But the figure has another function for me in this book. Mecenato, that's the way.
It could have a scientific. I mean, it could have the presentation of Don Pedro as an enlightened despot is also important, I think, because it's a clarity of some sort of order.
Right.
Yeah, validity and order also that's totally contrary. I think that's also that's a role that Don Pedro plays a lot in Europe because he's a very famous figure for astronomers. So he's very interesting because he's an astronomer who studies astronomy, a king who studies astronomy, but at the same time he's also some emanation of European order to Brazil, I think, perhaps.
And maybe
He sent the notes to the French Academy, Paris Academy of Sciences.
He what?
He sent the notes to the Comte Rendu,
Yeah.
the emperor, and he was a member, in
Yeah.
fact, of the academy.
Yeah. As well. If you have questions in Portuguese, I can try to understand or you can translate.
I have. I have a lot. So
Let's go.
try to focus. The question is, I was. It was just about the engravings, because he traveled with engravers with him, both to Pernambuco and to Minas Gerais, né? He took Ladislau Neto e o outro Eduardo de Moraes, né? No, not at that time. He was just a student from the Academy of Arts. He wasn't the director of the museum. He became director afterwards, in 1870, I know. So, and Ian Argent, as you said, just made his drawings based on the drawings of those two guys. So, but what I would say, just thinking about that, he never traveled alone, not at all. It appears very, very scattered in the book. For instance, when he mentions the drawers that traveled with him, his wife, in some engravings where there are other men in horse, and he doesn't mention it, but there were slaves, certainly. Those white men wouldn't carry the luggage by themselves, never, in Brazil, never, impossible. So probably, and in another, in a project he sends to the Brazilian Minister of War, he asks for resources to do his research, and he asks for horses and slaves. So we can suppose he was. What I mean, he was never alone. So my question is, when he pictures himself, when he describes himself as a lonely man, a civilized man in the middle of a menacing nature, isn't that a kind of romantic literature he is trying to produce? It's a moment where the public market for books and travel books is increasing in Europe and maybe even in Brazil. So isn't that a kind of rhetoric?
No, without doubt. I think you point out a really important thing here, that it's the same for explorers of Africa who go with thousands sometimes of people, and you have the impression that they walk alone in the forest, right? In this case, in Liais' case, it's interesting because, as I mentioned, and right to point out, he portrays himself in this solitude. But there's a sense in which sometimes it might be a true feeling. Even if you're surrounded by hundreds of slaves, you might feel lonely. I don't know. But in the other sense, it is certainly a rhetorical strategy. I think so too. So I think we have to read it more carefully than I just did now, and perhaps it is. I don't know if there is any general literature about that, because I think it's a very common theme. Perhaps the thesis you mentioned might touch this aspect.
Alex Punk's thesis on the eclipse expeditions. He raises that issue.
He
of
raises
that kind
the
of
infrastructure, but not the rhetoric of loneliness.
Against nature.
Against nature.
He suggests that. And there's a paragraph I remember because it's very rhetoric, and he says that, well, when those men claims that they are lonely, those astronomers, he makes a contrast between astronomers on one side and naturalists on the other. And he says that when one naturalist says he is alone, he might have been alone. But when one astronomer says that, never. He had the instruments, they are heavy, lots of luggage, they are fragile. So when he says he is lonely to an European, he may be lonely for, he is not. I mean, I forgot the paragraph, it's so beautiful and I forgot. But that's it. I mean, it's a relative statement. And let's put it's okay. So Alex Pons. I have one more question. No, it's the last one. Otherwise, we could take a cup of coffee and go on talking. Yeah, we should, for sure. When you mentioned that you actually stated that you're not saying that he advanced the theory of relativity, Einstein's theory of relativity, something that Anselm did a little bit when he said that he anticipated, not that he influenced, but anticipated, etc. And now my question is, when he avoids mathematics, and when he states that precision and mathematical tools are not useful to everything, even in astronomy, isn't he more against determinism? And in this case, his focus is Le Verrier. Then more against determinism than for relativism. That's the point. Because he says in a certain part of the book that Le Verrier, all that he knew is to compute. He wasn't an astronomer at all. But he discovered a planet with his computing.
There is a debate, a similar debate in the astronomy as we see in the naturalists. For example, the cabinet natural versus the void.
The observatory, yeah, there is a little bit, yeah.
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 Go to the champ, je sais pas.
The field.
The field, or stay in the observatory isolated as you.
Yeah. No, there is a debate. It's played out during the transits of Venus, for example. The transits of Venus occurred in 1874 and 1882, and it was a way to measure the distance between the Sun and the Earth, basically. And they sent expeditions all over the globe for that, to observe the phenomenon. And at the same time, Le Verrier was really encouraging some new measurement of the speed of light, and it turns out with the speed of light you can also evaluate that quantity, that distance. And he claimed he was also, he took this opportunity to say that he changed you didn't have to go all across the world to measure the distance, but you could do it in the lab. But in fact, it's an older tradition, because even in the 18th century, with the flattening of the Earth debate, whether the Earth is flat on the poles or whether it is spherical or even elongated at the poles, some people also use that argument that mathematicians could deduce the shape of the Earth in their cabinet without having to go to Finland or Peru in that case to evaluate the shape of the Earth. But there's a very long tradition about that. With regards to determinism and relativity, it's a very interesting point. There is a strong opposition by a few members of the French public, Flammarion in particular, as you well know, directing, acidly reproaching Le Verrier of having a very dry vision of the Earth, of the universe, where it was only like it's all near clockwork, with mathematics as the only way to get to that world. I'm not sure that I would have to. So Liais is a little bit in that direction, but he's also. I said he was not a good mathematician. He's also someone who does it, correctly when he has to. He's able to do some cartographic work, and he invents some new instruments, and describes them in lots of details. So he's a competent mathematician. He's not a great mathematician, but he's really competent, and he does it what he has to. He's not somebody who says we can do science without mathematics per se. So, but I think it's an interesting idea that in fact that's what he says. It's the condition for measuring and doing mathematical studies of the cosmos and the Earth and all that. The conditions have to be, you have to consider it in physically, right? So that there will be, there's a limit to what you can do mathematically, because we live in a physical world where some physical limits have to be achieved. So in this sense, it is some sort of relativism, I think. Yeah. But I don't think he never does never goes the next step, which is done by Poincaré or Einstein. And as Peter Galizet has shown, it's really much anchored in the observatory science tradition of mapping and all that, right? But he never goes. I think Liais never goes into the direction of trying to mathematize that relativism that Poincaré and Einstein do. As far as I can tell.
Yeah, well...
it's our deadline,
It's your deadline.
Yeah, it's my deadline. Well, I think Eloisa wants to say something. I want to thank you very much, both of you. It was a privilege to have you here and talk. For me, it was a privilege, and I think for everyone who assisted. And I hope we have more of these moments. Maybe Thursday?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I'll be here for sure, although I don't understand anything of mathematics.
Só um questionamento, se puder traduzir para mim, em relação ao que vocês investigaram dos frontispícios, né, das imagens. Num dos slides que ele fala desse link da matemática com essas gravuras, o Liais, ele que produziu essas imagens, não, foi alguém que trabalhava para ele, mas ele que decidia como essas imagens iriam, não sabemos, ele que decidia como que essas imagens fariam parte desse contexto, dessa contextualização do que é a matemática, a astronomia, como que ele avaliava essas imagens, se ele só colocou por colocar porque era uma bela imagem que estava ali no livro.
Si nous savons si Liais a choisi spécifiquement quelques images pour faire de l'édition, etc. Et compléter leur
Yeah, the material conditions for making the books are unknown, as far as I know. What we know is that the pictures were brought back to France, the drawings brought back to France by Liais, and they were given to an artist who would do the engraving. It's very rare, actually, in books of that nature, that you have such an acknowledgement of the artist. Usually you have engravings, sometimes you don't even know who made them, sometimes you just have the name in very small letters at the bottom of the engraving. It's very rare that you put the name of the artist at the front of the book. So I suspect that someone, the author, the editor, valued the image so much that they wanted to put the name of the artist on the front page of the book. So that, to me, that is an indication of the great value of the images in the book, and that Liais probably was very much interested in those images. He paid the artist probably from his own pocket. And he probably insisted to put that on the front page. And as I say, most of the images are discussed in the book, mentioned in the book. They are part of the argument. So again, that seems to indicate that Liais was really involved in the selection of the images, and perhaps the production of the images, I don't know. But other than that, it's difficult to go further. We don't have a correspondence between the two or any other physical archives about the production. So, yeah.
It's an interaction.
Interrogation, yeah.
No more questions?
I have a lot, but we can do that.
Yes, at the bar.
On the bar.
Coffee, please. Anyway, thank you very, very much.
E está todo mundo convidado para quinta-feira, tem outra mesa que também é parte dessas atividades, que é sobre observatórios e mecânica celeste na matemática do século XIX. Talvez vai ser um desafio para nós todos, né? Mas eu acho que esse espaço aqui de história da ciência é para isso mesmo. De vez em quando coloca a gente em contato com coisas que a gente não conhece, né, com tanta intimidade, né? Varia bastante, mas enfim, estão todos super convidados para... Uma coisa que eu esqueci de dizer é, se alguém precisar de certificado, eu acho que agora alguns já foram embora, eu ia pedir para marcar do lado do nome. Então eu sei que alguns são alunos aqui do curso de preservação de patrimônio, ciência e tecnologia, então qualquer coisa, Esther, depois eles me mandam e a gente faz, tá bom? No mais, muito obrigada.
Thank you very much. It was really fantastic.
Eu tinha uma pergunta, mas não vou fazer ela, porque ela não tem nada a ver com o tema e não tem nada a ver.